The call came through the emergency channel at exactly 3:17 a.m., slicing through the quiet like a blade. And when the single dad answered with a call sign instead of his name, every trained ear in the control room froze, because that call sign belonged to a pilot who had vanished years ago, a ghost etched into aviation logs and whispered about in safety briefings. The ex-combat flyer the CEO never expected to hear from again, least of all from a man folding laundry in a cramped apartment while his daughter slept in the next room. If you believe in kindness and second chances, take a moment right now to like this video, comment, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel, because this story is about the quiet courage that survives after the world thinks it has finished with you. He had not planned to answer the phone that night. The city outside his window hummed with a distant restlessness, neon reflection trembling on rain-slicked streets, and the man moved softly through the apartment so he would not wake his daughter, whose school backpack leaned against the couch like a promise he could barely keep. His life had become a careful choreography of shifts and schedules, grocery lists and bedtime stories, scraped knees at second-hand jackets, all balanced on the thin edge of a paycheck that never quite stretched far enough. Once, he had lived above the clouds, trusted with land and machines worth more than the building he now lived in. But that had been before the accident, before the investigation, before the silence that followed him like contrails fading into sky. The phone buzzed again, and instinct, older than grief, took over. He answered not with his name, but with a call sign he had not spoken aloud in years, a sound that carried weight and memory and a kind of truth he had learned never to explain across the city, in a glass tower that caught the first gray hint of dawn. The CEO stared at the screen in disbelief as the call sign registered. She had built her reputation on precision and control, on turning failing divisions into profit and broken teams into sleek machines. Her company flew jets that stitched continents together, and her board trusted her because she did not flinch. Yet the call sign dredged up a chapter she had sealed away, a pilot whose record read like a legend, until it didn't. Until a storm and a malfunction and a decision made in seconds changed everything. The reports had been inconclusive, the blame quietly redistributed, and the man disappeared into obscurity. She had assumed he was gone for good, another casualty of a system that could not afford to pause. Hearing that call sign again felt like a crack in glass she had pretended was bulletproof. The man, meanwhile, leaned against the kitchen counter, listening to the clipped urgency of the voice on the other. And as it relayed a developing crisis, a test aircraft on a transcontinental route had encountered cascading failures. At altitude, redundancy unraveling in a way that simulations never predicted. Engineers were scrambling, executives were waking, and the CEO herself had taken the call because something in the data felt wrong. The man closed his eyes and pictured the sky the way he used to, layers of weather, stacked like moods, the way turbulence spoke if you learned to listen. He felt the old ache in his shoulder, the reminder of a hard landing long ago, and the deeper ache in his chest where pride and regret had settled into a dull companion. He gave guidance without hesitation, not as a hero returning, but as a professional who never forgot his craft, mapping solutions in his head with the calm that had once steadied crews in worst conditions. His daughter stirred in the other room, murmuring in her sleep, and the man's voice softened as he continued, because everything he did now filtered through her future. He had become a single dad when illness took his wife quickly and without apology, leaving him to learn tenderness in the margins of exhaustion. He braided hair badly and burned pancakes occasionally, and he learned that bravery could be as simple as showing up again and again. He had taken warehouse shifts and night security jobs, swallowed the sting of being recognized by strangers who remembered his face from news clips without knowing the whole story. Through it all, he kept flying alive in his mind, teaching his daughter to identify constellations from their fire escape, telling her stories about the sky that always ended with coming home. As the call stretched on, the CEO listened to the man describe failure modes and risk envelope with an intimacy that reminded her of why she had trusted pilots before spreadsheets took over. She realized with a chill that the solutions her team proposed were treating symptoms, not causes. The man's analysis cut deeper. challenging assumptions baked into corporate culture, pointing to training gaps and design shortcuts made under pressure to deliver. There was no bitterness in his tone, only a steady insistence on truth. She felt something shift, an uncomfortable recognition that leadership sometimes meant reopening wounds to clean them properly. The aircraft landed safely hours later, guided by insights that never made the press release, and a crisis that could have ended lives dissolved into a footnote. The CEO sat alone in her office as daylight filled the room, staring at a city waking up, and wondered how many other voices had been silenced because they did not fit the narrative. The man ended the call and stood in the quiet kitchen, hands braced on the counter, breathing through the rush of adrenaline that felt like greeting an old friend. He tucked the phone away and checked on his daughter, smoothing her hair and adjusting the blanket, the simple act grounding him more than any accolade ever had. He did not expect anything to come of the call. Experience had taught him that systems moved on, and those who fell behind were expected to adapt quietly. He packed lunches, walked his daughter to school beneath a sky clearing after rain, and went to work moving boxes in a warehouse that smelled of cardboard and oil. Yet a thread had been pulled, and threads have a way of unraveling what they touch. Days later, an email arrived from an address he recognized instantly, formal and cautious, requesting a meeting. He almost deleted it. The memory of hearings and lawyers and the way silence had been used as a weapon made his stomach knot. But he thought of his daughter's backpack by the door and the way she asked questions about fairness that had no easy answers. He agreed to meet, not for vindication, but because he believed that truth, once spoken, had a responsibility to keep going. The meeting took place in a quiet room away from cameras, where the CEO listened more than she spoke. The man laid out what he had seen years ago, the chain of decisions that had prioritized delivery, dates over pilot feedback, the training shortcuts that left crews improvising at altitude. He did not ask for his job back or an apology. He spoke because lives depended on it, because the sky did not care about corporate hierarchies. The CEO felt the weight of accountability settle into her bones. She authorized an independent review, reopened files that had gathered dust, and invited pilots and engineers into the process with a humility that surprised her own board. Word spread slowly, not as scandal but as change. Safety protocols were revised, training hours expanded, and a culture that had leaned too hard on automation began to value human judgment again. The man remained on the periphery, consulted quietly, paid fairly, his expertise acknowledged without fanfare. He picked up his daughter from school and listened to her recount small triumphs with the seriousness of a statesman, feeling something in his chest loosen. He had not sought redemption, but he felt a sense of alignment, as if the parts of his life were finally facing the same direction. The CEO watched the transformation with a mix of relief and resolve. She visited hangars and simulators, spoke with crews who felt heard for the first time in years, and recognized that leadership was not the absence of doubt, but the courage to act despite it. She thought often of the night call, of the man answering with a call sign like a lighthouse signal, and of the lives saved because someone listened. She arranged a scholarship fund for pilot families affected by past decisions, not as penance but as investment in a future where lessons were learned honestly. For the man, the greatest change was quieter. He took his daughter to an airfield on a clear Saturday and let her watch planes lift into the blue, explaining lift and trust, and why coming back mattered as much as going up. He began teaching part-time at a HD school, his patience shaped by fatherhood, his lessons grounded in humility. Students sensed the depth of his experience without needing the headline. At night, when the city lights shimmered and his daughter fell asleep mid-sentence, he allowed himself to imagine a life not defined by what he had lost, but by what he could still give. Near the end of this journey, when the company announced industry-leading safety metrics and a renewed commitment to pilot authority, the CEO invited the man to attend quietly, not as a symbol but as a witness. He stood at the back of the room, hands in his pockets, thinking of the long arc that had brought him there. The applause washed over him without landing, because the real reward was the knowledge that fewer families would get calls in the night, that fewer children would grow up asking why someone did not come home. If this story has touched your heart, if it has reminded you that listening can save lives, and that second chances often arrive disguised as late-night calls, please take a moment now to engage with this video and let us know you felt it too. And before the ending, we have one special request for you. Please comment below with the word hope, or share a moment when someone listened to you when it mattered, because your words may be the signal someone else is waiting for. The man returned home that evening to the familiar comfort of a small apartment filled with big dreams. He cooked dinner with his daughter perched on a street. Well, their laughter rising like music, and later they traced constellations on the ceiling with a flashlight, naming stars and inventing stories. Outside, planes crossed the sky, their lights steady, their paths true. The man did not answer with a call sign that night. He answered with presence, with love, with the quiet certainty that while the sky had once defined him, it no longer owned him. He had learned that even after the world moves on, a single voice, spoken at the right moment, can still change the course of things, and that sometimes the most powerful flight is the one that brings you safely home.